My name is Chester Mullins. Most people call me Chet. I'm 47 years old, and I've spent 19 of those years working as a ranger for the Appalachian National Forest Service. I've worked search and rescue, tracked lost hikers, documented animal activity, and handled hundreds of emergencies. I tell you this not to brag, but so you understand. I'm not the kind of man who believes in fairy tales or gets spooked easily. I grew up in Harlan County, Kentucky, in a coal mining town. My father was a miner. He died in a cave-in when I was 16. I was supposed to follow him into those tunnels, but I didn't. My mother remarried a Forest Service officer, and that's how I got into ranger work. I liked being outside better than being underground. Liked documenting things I could see and measure. I liked evidence. I didn't believe in things I couldn't prove. My grandmother used to tell me stories about the joint snake. She said it was an old creature that lived in deep water. Something that could break apart into pieces and put itself back together. She said it lived in the hollows and appeared when the earth was disturbed. I laughed at her. I told her it was folklore, stories people invented to explain things they didn't understand. I should have listened to an old woman who knew these mountains better than I ever would. I work out of the Blackwater District Ranger Station, about 12 miles from Blackwater Hollow. It's a small station, just me and another ranger named Tom Harvey during the winter months. The hollow itself sits in a deep gorge with steep limestone walls on both sides. Blackwater Creek runs through it, and the water stays cold year-round because of the springs feeding it. The forest there is old, mostly hemlock and birch trees that block out most of the sunlight. It's beautiful in a way, but it's also the kind of place where you can get lost easy if you don't know what you're doing. The hollow has a complicated history. Coal mining operations ran there from the 1920s until 1975. The miners dug tunnels deep underground, hundreds of feet down in some places. Those tunnels connected with natural cave systems that had existed in those mountains for thousands of years. When the mining stopped, the earth didn't settle right. Sinkholes appeared, the ground became unstable. You could see where the land was still shifting decades after the mines closed. The local people, the older ones especially, didn't like talking about the hollow. They'd warn visitors to stay out. The Shawnee people had considered it sacred, and they had warned against disturbing it centuries ago. There was a spring at the center of the hollow that the Cherokee called healing water. But there was also something else in the stories. Warnings about what lived in the deep parts of that water, about creatures that shouldn't be disturbed. In October 1993, the weather was strange. It had been dry all fall, which wasn't normal. The water levels in the creek were lower than usual. It was warm for October, one of those Indian summer days where you almost forget it's getting close to winter. But the mornings were cold, and fog would gather over the basin at the center of the hollow and just stay there, not lifting with the sun like it normally does. Rachel Hendricks was a wildlife biologist from the regional office. She was 34 years old, professional, careful, and experienced. She came to Blackwater Hollow to study the bear population, how they were doing, where they were migrating, that sort of thing. It was a 3-day solo survey. She had done it before. She had good equipment and knew the area. On October 17th, she checked in by radio at 8 p.m. She said she'd had a good day, was settling in for the night, and would check in again the next morning. But she never did. The next day came and went with no radio contact. By evening, the regional office got worried and called me. That's when the story started. I remember that morning clearly. The sun was just coming up and there was frost on the grass. I drove out to where Rachel had parked her truck at the base of the old logging road. Her vehicle was there, untouched. When I hiked the trail toward her last known location, I found her backpack about a third of a mile from the actual trail. Her gear was scattered around it. Her tent was still packed up, unused, and there was blood on the ground. Not a lot, but enough to tell me something had gone wrong. What got to me most was her research journal. She had made notes the day before, and in those notes she'd written about unusual water disturbance at the basin. She wrote about an acoustic anomaly, a sound coming from the water that she couldn't identify. She had sketched something in the margins. It was crude, but it looked like a creature, and she'd written, "Something is in the water, moving in sections, doesn't match any known species." I sat there for a long time, holding that notebook, feeling the cold October air on my face. I told myself it was probably a bear, maybe a big one that had startled her. Maybe she'd slipped and fallen in the creek. These things happen in the mountains. But as I looked up at the basin water in the distance, I noticed something that made my skin crawl. The water looked thick. Water shouldn't look thick. Water should be clear or cloudy, flowing or still. But this water looked like it was almost moving on its own, like something was underneath it, pushing it around. And the fog above it, the fog that should have burned off with the morning sun, just sat there like it was being held in place by something. That's when I knew something was really wrong. I radioed the station and called in Tom Harvey. I told him to bring backup supplies and to hike out to the basin. I said it was a search and rescue situation. I didn't mention what I'd found. I just knew I needed another experienced person out there. While I waited, I examined the area more carefully. There were tracks in the mud near the creek. At first I thought they were bear prints. I've seen plenty of those, but these were different. They formed a pattern like segments, like something had slid through the mud in linked sections. The impression was huge, maybe 8 feet across when fully extended. And there were multiple crossing patterns, suggesting whatever made them had gone through the water several times. I took photographs of everything. I documented Rachel's backpack contents. I even tried my radio, the one piece of equipment that should have worked perfectly. But when I oriented it toward the basin, it filled with static. Not normal static. This had a rhythm to it, almost like something underneath was trying to talk. That's when I got my first real look at the camera. We found Rachel's field camera near the water's edge. It was waterlogged, but I managed to get it open back at the station. Most of the images were ruined, but a few came through. The last photograph showed the basin water with something beneath the surface. It was blurred, out of focus, but it was there. Something large and structured. Something that didn't look like any animal I'd ever seen. Tom arrived around midday. He's a good ranger, experienced, not the type to spook easily. But when he saw the tracks and heard about the camera images, I watched something change in his face. My grandfather saw something like that once, he said quietly. In these waters. He said it moved like nothing that was supposed to be alive. He said it took things. We decided to search the basin area together. It was maybe 2 p.m., good daylight, clear visibility. We approached the water carefully, methodically. We weren't expecting to find Rachel alive, but we had to try. That's when the water went wrong. There was no wind. The air was still and cold, but the water in the basin started to move. It didn't splash or ripple like something moving through it. Instead, it rose and fell in a pattern, almost geometric, like something underneath was pressing upward in a specific sequence. The water got thicker, the way it had looked that morning, and mist started rising from it, even though the water should have been too cold to produce steam. The temperature dropped so fast that we could both see our breath. 20 degrees in maybe 30 seconds. "We need to leave," Tom said. It wasn't a suggestion, but we hadn't found Rachel yet. I told him to wait, and I stepped closer to the water's edge. I wanted to get a better look. I wanted to see what was causing this. And that's when the water moved. It wasn't a sudden burst or a violent surge. It was deliberate, controlled. A shape rose from the water, not all the way, just enough for me to see something massive beneath the surface. The shape was long and segmented, like connected rings. As it rotated, I caught glimpses of what looked like tentacles attached to each segment. And I saw eyes, multiple eyes, reflective eyes that caught the afternoon light. The creature turned those eyes toward me. Tom screamed. He actually screamed. I'd never heard him make a sound like that before. He backed away from the water, stumbling on rocks. When he looked at his arm, I saw why. 4 parallel cuts had appeared on his skin just above his wrist. Thin cuts, precise cuts. Something had struck him without warning. "Shoot it!" he yelled. I pulled my rifle and fired, twice, 3 times. The bullets went into the water. The creature didn't react the way an animal should. It didn't flee. It didn't flinch. One of the bullets seemed to pass right through whatever it was made of. The creature moved toward the shore. I fired again, aiming at where the head should be. The creature continued forward. It moved slowly, not hunting but deliberate. Tom was running now, moving away from the water toward the forest. I fired one more time and then followed him. We ran until we were out of the basin area and back into the thicker trees. My heart was pounding so hard I thought my chest would split open. We didn't stop until we reached the ranger station, a 3-hour journey that we made in half that time. Tom wanted to call for backup immediately. He wanted to get a team out there, shut down the area, bring in specialists. But I told him to wait. I told him I needed to think about what we'd actually seen. Because what we'd seen didn't make sense. It didn't fit into any rational explanation I could create. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about those eyes. I kept remembering what Rachel had written. And I kept thinking about my grandmother's stories. The next morning, Tom was different. He was scared, genuinely scared, in a way that made him seem smaller than usual. He told me he wasn't going back out to the basin. He said his family had stories about the creatures in those waters. Old stories passed down through generations. He said they were territorial. He said they were dangerous. I told him we had to go back. We had to at least try to find Rachel. We went back with better equipment. We brought extra rope, first aid supplies, and documentation tools. I wanted to collect physical evidence. I wanted something that could be examined, something that would prove what we'd encountered. We found the dead bear first. It was a black bear, a big one, maybe 400 pounds. It was lying near the basin edge, partially in the water. The way it was positioned, you would have thought something had killed it and then just left it there. But the way it was torn apart, that wasn't like anything I'd ever seen. The body was stretched, actually stretched, like something had pulled on it from multiple directions. The internal organs were gone. The chest cavity was emptied out completely, and the claw marks on the remaining flesh showed something with a hand structure totally different from any animal in these mountains. The spacing between the marks was wrong. There were too many of them. Tom threw up. That's the only time I'd ever seen him get truly sick. I collected water samples from the basin. I'm not sure why. Some part of me thought that if I could get this back to a lab, get it tested, maybe there would be an explanation. Something in the water that caused strange animal behavior, something scientific. But when we got back to the station and exposed the water to air, it did something impossible. Crystals formed on the surface of the sample. They grew rapidly, creating intricate patterns. As I watched them develop, I realized the patterns looked like tiny, segmented structures. They looked like miniature versions of the thing in the water. That's when I found the old items. While Tom was falling apart, I searched deeper in the basin area. There was debris scattered around, old things that shouldn't have been there. I found a mining helmet dated 1967. I found a work boot with a foot still in it. And I found a journal. The journal belonged to a man named Timothy Keefe. He was a miner who disappeared in 1967 when there was a cave-in. The final entries in his journal described something coming up through the flooded mine shaft. He wrote about it moving like separate pieces pretending to be one. He wrote that it watched them with too many eyes. The last entry, written in shaking handwriting, said, "It's taking us. I don't know why, but it's taking us." Tom left after that. He said he wasn't coming back. He said he'd tell his supervisor he was injured. He said no amount of money was worth what was happening. I didn't argue with him. I understood, but I couldn't leave. This was my job. This was my responsibility. I was alone. That evening, I sat in the ranger station and read everything I could find about the joint snake. I called my aunt and asked her to tell me what our grandmother had known. My aunt was reluctant at first, but she finally told me the stories. The creature appeared when the earth was disturbed. It was territorial to the underground spaces. It came to the surface when those spaces were threatened. It was intelligent. It was ancient. And it had been protecting Blackwater Hollow for longer than anyone could remember. As the sun set, I walked back to the basin. I don't know why I did it. Some part of me needed to see it again. Some part of me needed to understand what was happening. And I did see it. The creature rose as the darkness fell. It was bigger than I'd realized. The body was segmented. I could count 8 distinct sections, each one maybe 4 or 5 feet long. Each section had appendages attached to it, thin and flexible. The head region was complex, with a structure that almost looked like a face. Eyes, yes, multiple eyes that glowed faintly in the dimming light, and a mouth opening. The creature's total length, when fully extended, had to be close to 18 feet. The color shifted as I watched, from pale white to dark gray. The surface rippled and undulated, not moving with the body but moving independently, like the skin itself was alive separate from the muscle underneath. The segments were joined where they connected, the joints darker and more rigid than the rest. The creature rose completely out of the water. It had never done that before, and it looked directly at me. I lowered my rifle. I don't know why. It just seemed like the wrong response. So I spoke to it instead. I told it that I was sorry for the disturbance. I told it that this was its territory, and I respected that. I told it that I wasn't a threat. The creature made a sound. It was a deep vibration that I felt in my bones rather than heard in my ears. It moved closer, the segments undulating, the appendages reaching forward but not striking. It was like it was studying me. And for just a moment, I felt like we understood each other. Then Tom Harvey came crashing through the forest behind me, rifle in hand and panic on his face. Tom had decided to come back. He'd parked his truck at the logging road and hiked down to find me. He probably thought I was in danger. He probably thought he could help. The creature heard him coming. I saw it immediately shift focus, saw those multiple eyes fix on Tom as he broke through the tree line. The creature made a different sound then, sharp and aggressive. "Shoot it!" Tom screamed. "Shoot it now!" I raised my rifle, but the creature moved faster than anything that large should move. A section of its body, maybe a 10-foot length, launched itself toward Tom with precision. The appendages on that section spread out like a net and came down around him. Tom's scream was the worst sound I've ever heard. The appendages were pulling him toward the water, toward the creature. Tom was fighting, struggling, firing his rifle. The bullet seemed to pass right through the creature's body, through those semi-solid segments, doing nothing. I had a choice to make. I could try to save Tom. I could shoot at the creature, try to distract it, try to help my fellow ranger. Or I could accept that Tom was already gone and save myself. I ran. I know that makes me a coward, I know that. But in that moment I understood something that changed everything. This creature wasn't evil. It was defending. Tom had invaded its territory twice. He had attacked it with bullets and noise. He had threatened it, and it was claiming him. I ran into the forest and didn't look back. I could hear Tom screaming behind me. I could hear that terrible vibration sound, but I didn't stop. I didn't help. By the time I reached the ranger station, my body was in shock. I could barely move. I sat in front of the radio for a long time, my hand hovering over the transmit button, unable to press it. What was I going to say? What would I tell them? That a creature from folklore had taken two people? That it was intelligent and territorial and defending something we didn't understand? They would think I was insane. So I filed a report that said we'd encountered aggressive wildlife. I said Rachel Hendricks was presumed dead, drowned, most likely. I said Tom Harvey was missing, probably taken by a bear. I recommended that the hollow be closed to public access, but I said it was for geological reasons. Unstable ground from the old mining. No one would have believed the truth anyway. I took medical leave after that. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't think about water without getting sick. I asked for a desk job when I came back to work 3 months later. I spent the rest of my ranger career in an office, doing paperwork and administrative work, never going back into the field. Tom Harvey's family never forgave me. They found out somehow that I'd left him there. I don't blame them. Rachel Hendricks was buried without a body. There was a memorial service. Her colleagues talked about how dedicated she was, how passionate about her work. None of them knew the truth about where she was. None of them knew that she was still there, in that basin, part of something that was larger and stranger and more ancient than any of us could comprehend. I continued to make notes about the creature. I documented the incidents. I listened to reports of new disappearances in the hollow. 3 more people between 1994 and 1999, all during autumn, all experienced hikers or researchers. None of the bodies were ever found. Blackwater Hollow remains restricted. Officially, it's because of unstable geology, but the rangers who work that district know better. They don't go there. They don't talk about why. I retired in 1998. I left Kentucky and moved to North Carolina. I've been living a quiet life since then, trying not to think about what I left behind in those mountains. But sometimes, especially on cold autumn nights, I hear that vibration sound. I feel it in my bones. And I wonder if the creature is still there, still watching, still waiting for the next person foolish enough to disturb its territory. I never told this story before. No one would believe it, and frankly, I didn't want anyone to. But I'm telling it now because I have a warning for anyone who listens. There are places in those mountains that don't belong to us. There are creatures living in the deep water, in the spaces beneath the earth, that were here long before we arrived, and will be here long after we're gone. If you ever hear sounds from deep water in an Appalachian hollow, if you see the water move without cause, if you feel like you're being watched by something beneath the surface, leave. Leave immediately. Don't investigate. Don't document. Don't look back. Respect the boundaries. Some territories aren't ours. And some old stories, the ones people laugh at and dismiss as folklore, those old stories were warnings, and I should have listened to my grandmother. My name is Catherine Summers, but everyone calls me Cat. I'm 42 years old, and I've been a ranger for the Great Smoky Mountains National Forest for 16 years. I grew up around these mountains. My mother was a ranger too, served for 24 years before she retired. So the mountains aren't just my job, they're my home. I'm good at what I do. I know how to track animals, how to rescue people from dangerous situations, and I understand the science behind how these mountains work. I've published papers about mountain ecology. My colleagues respect me. The Cherokee community here trusts me because I've spent years learning about their history and their relationship with this land. I'm not the type of person who believes in scary stories. I've never been superstitious, never believed in supernatural stuff. When people talk about the Wampus Beast, that old Cherokee legend about some kind of monster prowling the mountains, I always treated it as cultural folklore, something important to understand and respect, sure, but not something that was actually real, not something that hunted. That changed in August 1996. Clingman's Dome is the highest point in the Great Smoky Mountains. It sits at 6,643 feet, right on the border between North Carolina and Tennessee. On any summer day, thousands of people visit. They come to hike, to see the views from the observation tower, to take pictures. It's busy, it's safe, or at least, that's what I thought. August that year was hotter than normal, unusual heat for the mountains. The drought was bad, vegetation was stressed, animals were acting strange. They'd come down to lower elevations looking for water. We noticed that immediately. But we didn't think it meant anything serious. Then the first report came in. A family hiking on the upper ridge told us they'd seen something large moving through the trees. They said it was like a big cat, but all wrong. They couldn't describe it better than that. They were just tourists, probably scared by a regular animal, I thought. Could have been a black bear standing on its hind legs. Happens more often than people realize. But then we found the elk. It was near Forney Ridge, on the high plateau where the trees are thin and twisted. The kill was wrong, all wrong. An elk is a big animal, powerful, dangerous. Whatever killed it didn't just hunt it. The elk had been strangled. Its body was arranged carefully, deliberately. The organs were untouched. No predator I knew about kills like that. A mountain lion takes what it can eat immediately. A bear rips into whatever it catches. This was different. This was something with intelligence, something with purpose. I called Dr. Aaron Mitchell, a wildlife pathologist I'd worked with before. He drove up that same day. We stood over that dead elk together, and I could see in his face that he was confused too. "I don't know what did this," he said finally. Marcus Webb, one of my senior rangers, found the tracks first. He called me over with an edge in his voice I'd rarely heard from him. We both stood there, staring at the ground. The prints didn't make sense. They had 5 digits instead of 4. The palm looked almost human, shaped like a hand. The claw marks in the nearby trees reached 12 feet up the trunk. 12 feet. That meant whatever made those marks had to be standing on its hind legs at 8 feet tall and reaching up 4 more feet. The angles weren't right for any animal I knew. "Don't tell anyone else yet," I told Marcus. "Let me document everything first." That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in my ranger's cottage just thinking about those tracks. Thinking about the way that elk's body had been arranged. Thinking about something so big it could leave prints like that. By morning, there had been more visitor reports. People felt watched on the ridge. One couple said they felt a presence so strong they couldn't breathe properly. They left the trail and hiked back down, their hearts pounding. This was more than just an animal. I just didn't know yet how much more. "There's another one," Jennifer Lopez said over the radio. She was one of our seasonal rangers, smart and detail-oriented. "Tourist found another animal, dead, same place as the last one." I was at the station reviewing photographs of the tracks. My coffee had gone cold 3 hours ago. I grabbed my jacket. "Same area?" I asked. "Forney Ridge, near the summit." Marcus was already suited up when I got to the vehicle. "This is the second kill in 2 days," he said quietly. We drove up as far as we could, then hiked in. Jennifer was waiting with a young couple who looked terrified. The woman was crying. The man kept looking back over his shoulder nervously. "We were just walking the trail," the woman said. "We wanted to see the view. We came around some rocks and it was right there." "What was right there?" I asked gently. "We don't know," the man said. "Something big, shaped wrong. We ran. We just ran." The dead animal was a young elk, maybe 2 years old. It was positioned the same way as the first one, strangled, body laid out carefully, nothing eaten. And this time, there were more claw marks on the surrounding rocks, deep gouges that suggested the creature had been testing its claws. The marks formed a pattern, almost like the creature had been walking back and forth, claws extended. "It was practicing," Marcus said quietly. "Practicing what?" Jennifer asked. Nobody answered because we didn't know. That afternoon we got the report that made everything real. A young girl, 8 years old, had wandered off the main trail while her parents were looking at the view. When they found her 30 minutes later, she was standing on a side trail, completely still, not moving, just standing and staring at the trees. When her mother touched her, the girl screamed. It took both parents to carry her back down. At the ranger station, she wouldn't talk, wouldn't explain where she'd gone or why she'd wandered off. But her eyes kept looking at the forest. And when she spoke, it was only to say one thing, over and over. "The woman thing. I heard her voice." That night, while the girl's parents were calling for an ambulance to take her to a hospital, we gathered at the station. Marcus, Jennifer, and me. Dr. Mitchell was on the phone from his office. "Whatever this is, it's intelligent," he said. "The kill patterns show planning. The body arrangement shows control. I'd say we're looking at a predator with cognitive ability on par with primates, maybe higher." "That doesn't narrow it down much," I said. "Catherine, I've looked at every species documented for this region. Bears, mountain lions, wolves, none of them fit. The genetic material I recovered from the claw marks doesn't match anything in the database." The line went quiet for a moment. "You're looking for an unknown animal," he said finally. "Something that shouldn't exist. But it does." Jennifer was pale. Marcus was staring at his hands. I thought about that girl's voice, the woman thing. And then, that night, something terrible happened. A photographer named David Chen had been camping near Forney Ridge, trying to capture sunset images. He never came back to his tent. The search started at dawn. We organized teams, called in volunteers, contacted the sheriff's office. By 10 that morning, we found his camera. It was near the ridge, sitting on a rock. The memory card was intact. We brought it back to the station and hooked it up to the computer. Most of the photos were beautiful, trees, rocks, light filtering through branches, professional quality work. The last few images showed Forney Ridge at sunset, and then, in the second-to-last photo, something appeared in the background. It was moving on the ridge above the photographer. The image was grainy, unclear, but it was there. The creature was bipedal, standing on 2 legs. The shape was vaguely feminine, muscular, but curved. And in the very last photo, before the camera must have fallen or been dropped, the creature's face was visible. It was looking directly at the photographer. The eyes were bright, almost glowing in the photograph. The face was both human and not human. intelligent and furious and somehow heartbroken all at the same time. We didn't find David Chen. We searched for 3 days. We found his tent, his camping gear, his shoes. We found a trail of disturbed earth leading up into the higher elevation where the vegetation was sparse. We didn't find him. By the 5th day, I wasn't sleeping. None of us were. The regional office was demanding answers. Local law enforcement was talking about calling in federal agencies. We had over 200 volunteers searching the mountains. And every day, we found something new. Another dead animal, marks on trees, and something worse. We started finding places where the earth itself looked disturbed, like something massive had been moving through the forest, testing its strength. Tree trunks that were partially uprooted, rocks that had been moved, clear paths of destruction that seemed almost random. Jennifer was scared now, genuinely frightened. She sat in the office and stared at that photograph of the creature, and her hands shook. "We need to tell someone," she said. "We need to tell the truth about what we saw in that photograph." "They won't believe us," I said. "They'll think the image is doctored. They'll think we've lost our minds." "Better than letting it keep killing," she said. Marcus had been quiet all day. That evening, he asked to talk to me alone. We stood outside the ranger station, looking up at the mountains. The sun was setting, and the light was orange and red against the peak. "My grandmother told me stories about the Wampus beast," Marcus said quietly. "When I was a kid, she said it was real, said it hunted people who didn't respect the sacred places. I didn't believe her. I thought they were just stories." "Do you believe her now?" I asked. "Yeah," he said. "Yeah, I think I do." The next morning, another hiker was found. She was alive, but something had happened to her. She'd been hiking a trail near Forney Ridge, and she'd felt like something was following her. Not attacking, just following. For 3 miles. She could hear it in the trees, keeping pace with her. She described an overwhelming sense of wrongness, like the world itself was pressing down on her. Her heart rate was elevated so much that she had to be taken to a hospital. The doctors couldn't find anything physically wrong with her. That's when I made a decision. I went to meet with an elder from the Cherokee community. Her name was Iris, and she was 83 years old. She'd lived in these mountains her whole life. She knew the old stories, the real stories. Iris sat on her porch with a cup of tea, and she looked at me with eyes that had seen a lot of life. "You've come to ask about the Wampus beast," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," I said. She sipped her tea slowly. "A long time ago, before the mountains belonged to America, before there were rangers or tourists or lodges, a woman came to these sacred places. She was not supposed to be there. The hunting grounds were sacred. She came anyway. She saw things she was not permitted to see." "What happened to her?" I asked. "She was transformed," Iris said, "as punishment, as a curse. The woman's spirit was bound to a beast's body. She hunts in these mountains. She will hunt forever, or until the sacred places are respected again." "Why is she killing?" I asked. "She is not killing for hunger," Iris said. "The curse forces her to feed, to sustain both the body and the binding magic. But each life she takes is another violation witnessed, another betrayal of the sacred. The curse grows stronger when people disrespect these lands." I thought about the observation tower at the summit. 10,000 visitors a year. The trails cut through protected areas. Rocks moved from sacred cairns, trash left behind. "Can the curse be broken?" I asked. Iris looked at me for a long moment. "Only if the sacred places are respected," she said. "Only if the woman's pain is acknowledged. And only if someone willing to guard those boundaries stands between her hunger and the innocent." She reached out and touched my arm. "The woman in the beast is not evil, Ranger Catherine. She is suffering. The evil is in what we do to the sacred places, what we do to each other. The curse is only the echo of that evil." I left her house with more questions than answers. That night, Marcus came to me with something he'd found. He'd been researching old records, looking through historical reports from when the National Forest Service started operating in the area. He'd found something in files from 1946. A ranger had documented a creature sighting. The description matched exactly. The ranger had written it all down, then the report had been buried, sealed, marked unsubstantiated wildlife theory. Then he found a file from 1971. Another ranger, another sighting. Same description, same response, buried and sealed. This had been happening for generations, and every time people tried to document it, and every time the official response was to hide it. The next day we saw it. I was leading Marcus and Jennifer up to Forney Ridge. We were going to look for more evidence, try to understand the pattern of the creature's movements. We were being stupid. We were being brave.
It amounts to the same thing sometimes.
We came around a rocky outcrop, and it was just there. The creature was standing on its hind legs. It was 7 feet tall, maybe 8. Its body was massive, muscular in a way that shouldn't be possible for a living thing. The upper body was shaped like a human woman. The torso, the arms, the neck, all human proportions. But the lower half was something else entirely. The legs were feline, powerful, bent at angles that suggested unbelievable strength. A tail moved behind it, muscular and controlled. The fur was tawny, golden, short. And where the human and animal parts met, you could see the transition, skin to fur, seamless and wrong. But it was the face that made your mind break. The face was beautiful, distinctly feminine, fine features, intelligent eyes. Those eyes were large and glowing, amber-colored, burning with intelligence and rage and something else, something like sorrow. The creature's expression shifted when it saw us.
The anger smoothed away.
The eyes blinked, and for just a moment, something like recognition passed across that impossible face. The creature made a sound. It started as an animal growl, something from deep in the chest, but it changed. The sound became almost human, words almost formed. No, something like that. Stop running. Then Jennifer screamed. It wasn't a conscious decision. Jennifer just screamed, and the spell broke. She turned and ran. Marcus grabbed my arm and pulled, and we ran too. Behind us, the creature moved, not running, trotting, following. We could hear it crashing through the forest behind us. We could hear it breathing. We could feel its presence like pressure on our backs. And then, after 50 yards, it stopped. It didn't follow us off the ridge. It just stood there and watched us run. When we got back to the station, we were shaking, all 3 of us. Jennifer couldn't stop crying. Marcus kept washing his hands over and over, like he could wash away what he'd seen. And I kept thinking about those eyes, about that face, about what the creature had been trying to say. "Stop running," I said quietly. "What?" Marcus asked. "That's what it said, stop running. I think it wanted us to listen." I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I read. I went through every historical record I could find, the tribal archives, old ranger reports, historical documents about the area, and slowly, a story emerged. The Wampus Beast legend was real, but not the way people thought. It wasn't some mythical monster that had always existed. It was a woman, a real woman, from over 200 years ago. She had come to the sacred hunting grounds. The tribe had forbidden it, but she came anyway, driven by curiosity or arrogance or some need she couldn't suppress. She witnessed a sacred ritual she wasn't permitted to see. The punishment was transformation, but it wasn't meant to be temporary. The curse was designed to last as long as the sacred places were disrespected. And if the woman accepted the curse voluntarily to protect the sacred ground, perhaps redemption was possible. Someone had made that choice long ago, and she was still here, still trapped, still hunting. The dream came that night. I know it was a dream because I was asleep in my bed, but it felt real. I felt something touch my mind, not my body, but my mind directly. And suddenly I was standing on Forney Ridge in the moonlight. The creature was there, up close, real. But it wasn't attacking. It was just looking at me. And I understood somehow in that dream space beyond words what it needed me to understand. The woman had accepted the curse. She had made the choice because it was her violation that brought the curse down. She took the transformation so she could serve as guardian, as enforcer of the sacred boundaries.
Every animal she killed was meant to punish someone who was violating the sacred places.
Every hunt was an act of protection. Even though the curse forced her to hunt, even though her human consciousness was trapped in a body driven by predatory instinct. She was a prisoner and a guardian, all at once. And she was so tired of hunting, so tired of suffering. I woke up crying. The next morning, I knew what I had to do. Marcus was against it. Jennifer begged me not to do it. But I understood now, and I couldn't look away from understanding. I went up to Forney Ridge alone. No weapons, no team, just me. The creature was waiting. It was standing on the same rocky outcrop where we'd seen it before. When I stepped into the clearing, it turned to look at me. I kept walking toward it, slowly, deliberately, trying to show it I wasn't afraid, trying to show it respect. When I was about 10 feet away, I stopped. "I know what you are," I said. "I know what was done to you, and I'm sorry." The creature's expression changed. The ears flattened. Something like a whimper came out. "The sacred places you protect, they matter," I said. "The Cherokee know that. I know that. And I promise you, I'm going to make sure other people know it too. I'm going to protect these boundaries. I'm going to reduce the violations. I'm going to respect what's sacred here." The creature took a step toward me, then another. It came within reaching distance, close enough that I could see the scar marks on its neck, like something binding it, holding it. Close enough to see the human intelligence in those amber eyes. Close enough to see the anguish. The creature made sounds, not quite words, but almost. "Thank you," something like that. "Rest, please. Let rest." And I understood it was asking for something I couldn't give. The curse couldn't be broken just by one person's compassion, but it could be lessened. The hunting could stop if the violations stopped. "If I protect the sacred places," I said, "will you protect the people? Will you deter them without killing them?" The creature made a sound that might have been agreement. It backed away slowly. Then it turned and disappeared into the rocks, moving with that strange, powerful grace. I stood alone on the ridge and felt something shift in the world. Like a balance had been restored. Like both of us, the woman in the beast and the ranger trying to understand, had found a reason to keep going. I filed a report that same day. I used language that would mean something to the regional office, but would really mean something to the Cherokee. I recommended that Forney Ridge be closed to the public indefinitely. I said it was because of environmental protection concerns, a potential endangered species habitat that needed restoration. I noted geological instability in the area. I used all the right words to justify closing the most sacred part of Klingman's Dome to foot traffic.
The regional office approved it by that weekend. We started posting signs the following week. Restricted area, no trespassing. The rare creature habitat needed protection. We set up a monitoring station, though what we were really doing was maintaining the boundary, protecting what was sacred, keeping people away. Marcus understood. He'd always understood, really. Jennifer eventually came around. She'd seen what we'd seen. There was no going back from that. I deepened my relationship with the Cherokee community. I started regularly consulting with them about how to protect sacred sites throughout the region. I went through the proper channels, learned the proper respect protocols, and became something like an unofficial guardian. The summer season continued. Tourists still came, but they didn't go to Forney Ridge. They didn't venture into the highest, most sacred places. The killings stopped. It took a few weeks, but we found no more dead animals on the ridge. The creature was hunting less, and as the sacred boundaries were respected more, as fewer violations occurred, the creature seemed to suffer less. We could tell because the areas of destruction diminished. The panic in the visitor reports faded. By September, things had almost returned to normal, almost. But I'll never forget what I learned up there, and I'll never forget the face of that creature, that woman, as she tried to communicate something I couldn't quite understand, except that it was about loss and protection, and a curse that never ends but can be made bearable. Sometimes when I hike the mountains, I feel watched. I know what's watching, and I nod respectfully, and I move on. I walk carefully through sacred places now. I don't take what doesn't belong to me.
I don't violate the boundaries. The Wampus beast is still out there, still on Forney Ridge, still cursed and trapped in that impossible body. But she's at peace now, in whatever small way that's possible, because someone finally understood. Someone finally respected what she was trying to protect. The danger doesn't come from her anymore. The danger comes from disrespect, from violating what's sacred, from treating places of power as if they're just scenery. If you ever hike Klingman's Dome and you feel like something is watching you, stay on the main trails. Respect the boundaries. Don't wander into sacred spaces just because you're curious. Because the thing watching you isn't evil. It's just a woman, trapped in a curse, doing the only thing she can do to protect what matters. And that's terrifying in a way that monsters never could be. My name is Marcus Holloway, and I've been a ranger in the Appalachian National Forest for 28 years. I'm 54 now, and I was planning to retire quietly and live out my remaining years somewhere peaceful and forgettable. That plan changed in May of 1995. I grew up here in West Virginia, in the shadow of Point Pleasant, where strange things happened in 1966. My parents thought those stories about the Mothman were just talk, the kind of nonsense people tell when they're scared. I was young then, skeptical. I thought monsters belonged in movies, not in our forests. But I joined the Forest Service partly because I wanted to understand what was really out there. I wanted facts, not rumors. I never expected to find the truth. The Point Pleasant District Ranger Station sits 8 miles from the TNT plant, what used to be a munitions factory during World War II. The plant's been abandoned since 1945, but the forest never completely swallowed it. The buildings still stand, slowly falling apart, surrounded by 2,000 acres of reclaimed woodland. The concrete remains like bones in the earth. There's an old drainage system that connects to an underground aquifer, and in spring, water seeps up everywhere, creating marshland in patches. The ground there feels wrong, too wet, too cold, like the earth is exhaling something it shouldn't. I had 2 rangers working under me. James Cole was young, just 26, with 6 years of service and unlimited enthusiasm. He believed in everything I said. Sarah Chen had more sense, 3 years with the service, always questioning, always thinking. She was the one who kept me honest, even when I didn't want honesty. That spring was unusual. The humidity was wrong for May, too heavy. Fog rolled in at night and didn't lift until nearly noon. We were getting electrical storms almost every week, which wasn't normal. The high mineral content in the soil, left over from the munitions facility probably, seemed to pull the lightning down like a magnet. The first sign wasn't dramatic. It was a phone call from John Wesley, a farmer who lived about 3 miles from the TNT plant. His sheep were dead. I drove out that morning. John was waiting by his fence, looking older than his 71 years. His face was the color of old parchment, and his hands wouldn't stop shaking. "I found them this morning," he said, his voice thin as paper. "Something got into the pen during the night. But Marcus, it wasn't any animal I know." We walked to the pen together. There were 4 dead sheep, all of them arranged in a careful circle. That was the first thing that struck me as wrong. Predators don't arrange their kills. Predators eat and leave. The wounds were even worse. Each animal had precise cuts, almost surgical. The organs were missing, not scattered like a wild animal would leave them, but removed cleanly. The wounds didn't match any predator attack I'd ever documented. There were no ragged edges, no signs of thrashing or struggle. It was like something had opened them up on a table. "I saw it," John said quietly, "before I came inside, just for a second. Something big was watching from the trees. Enormous wings, but not any bird shape I know. It moved wrong, like it was studying what I was looking at." I told him what he wanted to hear, that it was probably a large predator, maybe a wolf, maybe something escaped from somewhere. I took photographs. I collected tissue samples. I did everything by procedure. But standing there in the morning cold, with dead animals arranged like an offering, I couldn't shake the feeling that John was telling the truth, and I was terrified of what that meant. The next 3 days, everything escalated. James and I started finding more dead animals. Birds, mostly. Crows, hawks, raptors that should have been able to defend themselves. We found them spread across the forest floor near the TNT plant, arranged in geometric patterns. The birds' wings were broken in identical ways, bent at angles that couldn't happen naturally. Feathers scattered across the ground in careful lines, like something was marking territory. The feathers were wrong too. They were 16, 18 inches long, with a dark metallic gray color and an iridescent quality I'd never seen before. When I held them up to the light, they seemed to shimmer, like they weren't entirely made of normal matter. I sent samples to a university contact I had, someone I'd worked with on wildlife studies before. He called me back within 24 hours. "Marcus," he said, "I don't know what these are. The protein structure isn't consistent with any bird species in our records. The cellular composition is off. It's like comparing a photocopy to the original, similar but fundamentally different." The tracks we found in the mud near the dead animals were worse than the birds. 3-toed footprints, impossibly deep, spaced so far apart that whatever made them was covering 20 feet with each step. The depth of the prints suggested incredible weight, something massive, something that shouldn't exist. Sarah pulled me aside on the 4th day. "Marcus, you need to report this properly," she said. Her voice was level, but I could see fear in her eyes. "This is beyond what we can investigate. We need the regional office involved." "Report what?" I asked. "That we found some dead animals? That we found feathers that don't match any bird we know?" "You know that's not what this is," she said. "And you know what people will say if you start talking about creatures that don't fit any database." She was right. I knew exactly what would happen. I'd be labeled a crackpot. The investigation would be closed. The case would disappear into a filing cabinet, and whatever was out there would keep hunting. So I did something I shouldn't have. I assigned Sarah to desk duties and told her to stop asking questions. I told James we were continuing the field investigation, whether the regional office approved it or not. James wanted to argue, but he didn't. He just nodded and checked his equipment. That night, I did something even more dangerous. I went into the old filing archives at the ranger station, boxes that hadn't been opened in decades. Most of them were routine forest management documents, nothing important. But in a box labeled 1967 Incident Reports, I found something someone had deliberately hidden. Handwritten notes from the previous supervisor, a man named William Garrett, who retired in 1969. Detailed documentation of creature sightings from 1966 and 1967. Descriptions that matched exactly what we were finding now. Reports of the same animal deaths, arranged the same way. Accounts of a creature with massive wings and a humanoid shape. And at the bottom of the stack, a note attached to my daughter's case file from 1985. My daughter Emily had disappeared near the TNT plant when she was 23. They found her body 3 days later on a hillside 5 miles away. The official investigation called it suicide, though there was no note, no clear reason, and a body positioning that never quite made sense. I'd tried to get the investigation reopened a dozen times over the years. I'd been angry at the Forest Service, at the local police, at God, at everyone and everything for not digging deeper. Garrett's note said, "Creature activity documented in target area during time of disappearance. Recommend official investigation as possible predation event. Request denied by regional office. Incident classified. File sealed." My hands were shaking as I read that. All these years I'd believed my daughter had killed herself. All these years I'd blamed myself for not being there, for not understanding her pain. But she hadn't killed herself. Something had killed her. Something had taken her the same way it was taking these animals, and I'd been too blind to see it. James found me sitting in the archives room at midnight, surrounded by papers. He didn't say anything, he just sat down next to me and waited. "We're going back out there," I told him, "tonight. We're going to see what we're really dealing with." We set up an observation post at the TNT plant perimeter just after dusk. I brought a thermal camera and a recording device. The night was clear, cold, the kind of night where sound travels far. The old plant buildings rose around us like tombstones. At 11:47 p.m., I saw movement. A massive shape emerged from one of the ruined structures about 200 yards away. The thermal camera showed an enormous heat signature, far larger than anything that should be alive. When the creature moved into the moonlight, I could finally see what we were dealing with. It had wings. That was the first thing my brain registered. Wings that extended at least 30 feet when fully spread. The body was humanoid, a torso and 2 arms that moved with unnatural grace. The head swiveled toward us with a motion that no natural creature should be able to make. James made a sound beside me, something between a gasp and a prayer. The creature opened its mouth and sounds came out. Low-frequency vibrations that I felt in my chest. Clicks like nothing I'd ever heard. Rumbles that seemed to come from inside the earth. Not screams, not animal sounds. Something that felt almost like language. Then I felt it. Not with my ears, not with my eyes, but somewhere deeper. Something pressing against my mind, trying to communicate or maybe trying to control. I saw flashes of imagery that wasn't mine. A landscape I didn't recognize, sensations of hunger and ancient patience. And underneath it all, a recognition. It knew me. It was looking at me the way a hunter looks at a target it's been tracking for a long time. The fear hit me like a physical force. Not the normal fear of a dangerous animal, but something else entirely. Terror that felt imposed. Fear that didn't come from my own mind. This thing was feeding on my panic the way I fed on breakfast. "Run," I heard myself say. We ran. We made it back to the ranger station. I collapsed on the floor of my office while James called for medical attention. My heart was racing so fast I thought I was having a heart attack. My skin felt cold despite the sweat covering it. It took 3 hours before my hands stopped shaking enough to hold a pen. James stayed with me. He didn't sleep. Neither did I. The next morning I made a decision that would change everything. I called the regional office and filed an official report. I told them about the animal deaths, the patterns, the creature sightings. I didn't mention the telepathy or the way it had made me feel like a rabbit frozen in front of headlights. I kept to facts, coordinates, times, evidence collected. The response came back within hours. Evidence inconclusive. Recommend standard predator control procedures. No indication of non-native species. Continue investigation only if it follows established protocols. Do not file any further reports until facts are verified. They weren't going to help. They were going to ignore this until it went away. 2 days later, the creature came closer. We found evidence of it near the ranger station itself. Ground disturbed, vegetation twisted, the same 3-toed prints leading right up to our property line. It was testing boundaries, learning how close it could get. That night I made another decision. I went to the TNT plant alone. James begged me not to go. Sarah begged me not to go. I ignored them both. I was past caring about protocols or safety or reason. I wanted answers, and I wanted them from the thing that had taken my daughter. I carried a rifle. I don't know why. I think I knew already that bullets wouldn't stop it, but I carried one anyway. Humans need to feel like they have options, even when they're walking into death. The creature was waiting for me in the central ruins of the plant. This time, there was no hiding, no observation from a distance. It emerged from the shadows, completely visible, every detail clear in the moonlight. Wings that rippled like they were made of smoke and starlight. A body that seemed solid until you looked away, and then you weren't sure it had been solid at all. A head with eyes that gleamed with intelligence that was nothing like human intelligence. Older, colder, patient in a way that measured time in decades. It opened its mouth, and this time the communication wasn't just in my mind. It spoke in words I somehow understood, though I don't think it made human sounds. It said, "You remember. You know what I take. You came to understand your daughter's last moments. Come closer. Feel what she felt. Join her in the dark places below." I raised the rifle. My hands were steady now, calm even. When you face something truly terrible, ordinary fear stops working. That's when James arrived. He'd followed me against my orders. He still had his rifle from our observation post. He saw the creature and did the only thing that made sense. He opened fire. The bullets hit. I saw them strike, saw the creature flinch with something that might have been pain. It forgot about me. turned its full attention to the newcomer. James kept firing, stepping backward, trying to get distance. The creature moved faster. Its wing connected with him, and James went flying through the air like a paper toy. He hit the concrete hard enough to break bones, and when he tried to stand, his leg wouldn't work right. I could have run. I could have left him and escaped into the forest. He was already dying, I could see that much. His body was broken in ways that weren't survivable. But I'd already lost my daughter to this thing. I wasn't going to lose James, too. I ran toward the creature instead of away. I don't remember much after that. I remember screaming. I remember the feeling of something sharp and wrong passing through my shoulder. I remember James's voice calling for help. And I remember the moment the creature pulled away from us, as if satisfied, and retreated into the ruins. I dragged James back to the ranger station. He was conscious enough to tell me what to do, where to put pressure, how to stabilize his injuries. I radioed for an ambulance, and while we waited, I held his hand and told him he was going to be okay. I lied. We both knew I was lying. "Don't blame yourself," James said. His voice was barely a whisper. "This is what it does. It hunts. It has a territory. We came into its territory." "We should have reported it properly," I said. "We should have evacuated the area." "Would they have believed you?" James asked. "Would they have stopped it?" "No, they would have called you crazy and filed it away. You did everything you could." He died 2 hours after the ambulance arrived. The official report called it an accident, a fall from an abandoned structure. The creature was never mentioned. That's when I finally understood the truth about what we were dealing with. It wasn't a natural animal that could be tracked and trapped. It was something that had learned to hide in plain sight, that knew how to make deaths look accidental. It had been doing this for decades, maybe longer. The 1966-1967 sightings, my daughter in 1985, James Cole in 1995. There was a pattern, a cycle. I spent the next week pulling every document I could find. I read accounts from the 1920s of something called mothwing in Native American legends. I found references to identical creatures in Appalachian folklore dating back to 1898. Each time, there was a cycle. Appearances separated by 20 to 25 years. Each time, it would hunt for a year or two, then disappear completely. The current cycle was scheduled perfectly. 28 years since 1967. 13 years since my daughter's death in 1985. Whatever this thing was, it operated on a schedule as precise as clockwork. I also realized something darker. The creature had recognized me. It had known exactly who I was, and it had shown me my daughter's final moments, or something close to them. I think it had killed her because she was my daughter. I think it had been waiting for me to realize that truth, and that meant it might not be done hunting my family. Not yet. I filed a final report with the regional office, detailing everything except the supernatural elements. I documented James's death as creature predation and recommended the TNT plant be closed to all visitors. The response was swift and professional. The area would be designated a no-access zone due to environmental contamination. Ranger patrols were prohibited. The case was closed. But they kept all the documents. They archived them in sealed files. And I knew, the same way I'd known about my daughter's case, that someone had known about this thing all along and had decided it was better to hide the truth than to admit the impossible existed. The thing at Point Pleasant didn't go away. It's still there, sleeping maybe, but waiting. And according to my calculations, it will wake again around 2020. By then, I'll be long gone. But someone else will stand where I stood, holding evidence that doesn't fit, knowing a truth that no one will believe, watching something hunt in a way that rational people aren't supposed to accept. I retired the next month. I moved far from West Virginia, somewhere quiet where I could spend my remaining years writing down everything that happened. Not for publication, not for anyone to read, just for the record. Because if the creature returns on schedule, someone else deserves to understand what they're facing. Someone else deserves to know they're not crazy when they see something with wings that shouldn't exist, when they feel watched by something intelligent, when they find bodies arranged in patterns that make no sense. I'm an old man now, and I don't have many years left. My hands shake when I think about that night at the plant. Sometimes I still see James's face, Still hear the sounds the creature made when it spoke. Those images won't leave me, and I don't think they're supposed to. Some memories are meant to stay sharp, meant to keep you awake at night wondering what it all meant. The creature has a way of doing that to people. It doesn't just kill you, it changes you, it marks you. Even now, decades later, I can't walk past a shadow without a flutter of that ancient fear in my chest. And I'll never stop wondering whether my daughter felt the same thing. That pressing, demanding presence in her mind, forcing her to understand that the rational world was smaller than she'd believed. If you're reading this, and if you live anywhere near Point Pleasant, or anywhere in the deep Appalachian forests, you need to understand something. The thing that hunts there isn't gone. It's sleeping. And when it wakes, and it will wake, right on schedule, it will hunt the same way it always has. The only protection is distance and respect for territory. If you see something with massive wings, something that moves wrong, something that seems to watch you with intelligence, don't investigate. Don't try to understand it. Get away and stay away. The creature remembers. It's patient, and it has a taste for the curious and the brave. I wish someone had told me that before I lost everything. Vers.